There's a reason why for the last 13 years, startups overwhelmingly prefer to build on top of AWS. We have the largest number of services, making it easy for you to take on some of the biggest challenges with the smallest teams. We also have partnerships with the top VCs, accelerators, and incubators around the world, making it easier to secure your next round of funding.
I'm a solution architect with the AWS Head Start program. What we do is we work with startups in the education sector, and we help them build their services on AWS.
So We Power Tech is AWS's diversity and inclusion outreach program. The program is really twofold. One is to increase the number of underrepresented technologists within the industry, and the second is to provide a platform for them to be seen and heard.
If you're wondering how the AWS evangelism team might be able to help your startup, there are many ways. We're technically credible across our entire catalog of products, so we can help you figure out which services might be able to meaningfully impact your business. We also want to help tell your story. So if you're building something cool, we want to know about it and help spread that message to the world. So you might end up on stage at an event like AWS Summit. If you're a startup, you should also definitely check out the AWS Lofts. These are event spaces that are free to anyone with an AWS account. And you can treat them like co-working spaces, but the awesome thing about them is that we also have people like technical evangelists like myself, solutions architects that come and give hands-on technical workshops and sessions to help you learn how to more effectively utilize the AWS products and platforms that you're already building on top of.
We are a dedicated team of people that love startups, that we just want to come and help you with whatever we can, whether it be technical or business focused. We are here to help guide you and make sure that you do have a say in what's going on. We do get your feedback. We do bring that feedback to the service teams. That is what we're here for.
They tend to do that. They really let us operate with autonomy in the way that we had initially operated. And we worked together to find a plan to integrate the offerings and integrate the messaging. There was total conflicts, of course, at the beginning. We're a small, fast-moving, agile team. Jumping in the cold water of a publicly traded big co has a lot of compliance. They're a lot slower moving. You can't just plug a server in. They had a lot of training that we had to do that was pretty funny. So like, just for compliance sake, and some of it was just checking boxes. Like our team needed to do, Perforce. IP auditing training, but we didn't use Perforce. we used GitHub. So and we're
but
like,
I guess they have this checklist, and they gotta check every box, right? So yeah.
And they're just like, just do it and take the rest of the day off. And it's like, oh, okay, well, sure. And so there was conflicts there. There was definitely friction in personalities and working styles. It's hard for a startup to put the brakes on. It's and to take a lot of this compliance stuff seriously, because some of it is very, like the Brazil movie, very bureaucratic. But on the whole, most of our team stayed beyond our retention period. So when you get acquired, there's usually a lockup. I'll call that like a retention period, where the golden handcuffs is another term you hear. And almost all of our team stayed, and I think that speaks a lot to the leadership there and how they work that integration, and how we we also had a lot of control over our own destiny. And I think this is how a successful acquisition happens. You find a shared mission with the executive team, and they're going to sponsor you, and they're going to they want it to be successful too.
So you guys,
their reputation's on the line as well. Yeah.
So after the acquisition, you guys still had control in terms of the evolution of the product, and you were able to operate autonomously, right? Because I'm just thinking from even a strategic standpoint, right? So if you're acquired by this huge Adobe, how much leverage do they really have in terms of the roadmap for the product, right?
Well, and we were an interesting one where not everyone knew what the integration was going to look like, and there definitely was conflict, absolutely. But everyone's adults, so we worked through it. But when we got acquired, PhoneGap was being downloaded in the millions of times a month, and a large portion of our revenue was services, contracts, and support contracts. And Adobe's not in that business. They didn't want to do that stuff, but they did want to leverage that funnel. And so we had a hosted offering called PhoneGap Build, which we were building into Creative Cloud, and we thought that was going to be a pretty good funnel for Creative Cloud, and it was a high conversion rate, and that worked well. But on the side, there's this other, Adobe's huge, so they have multiple clouds. They have another cloud, and that one's called Marketing Cloud. I think they now have 3 clouds. I think there's a Document Cloud too. But anyway, so in the Marketing Cloud, they needed mobile apps, and they built them with PhoneGap, and then they realized they could automate that process, and then they started to sell those, and it became an add-on for the Marketing Cloud, which was formerly known as like Omniture, kind of mixed together with this thing called CQ, really big enterprise contracts. And so PhoneGap started to see some pretty significant revenue get attributed to it, and we couldn't really expect these things. It's when you get into the big enterprise software sales, the opportunities will reveal themselves to you if they happen to exist, and you can execute on them. And yeah, we found these, and we chased revenue. We taught them quite a bit about both open source and open source governance, and having an open core business model. And I think it was a good partnership both ways. There's still a lot of those team members at Adobe today. So.
Right. So did you guys actually share the same vision in terms of donation of the code to Apache, or was it more you guys championing that and then getting their support?
It was actually largely IBM championing that, and they were worried about that IP naming a company that has a lot of patents also. And so we had initially licensed this thing, MIT, and IBM strongly encouraged us to adopt a multi-license model where we would include Apache. And the reason you wanted to have an Apache 2 license is it has clauses that don't trigger patent clauses. It's got better patent protection if everybody opts in with CLAs. And you're never going to get a contributor license agreement signed by one big company handing over IP rights to another big company. So they need an intermediary, and that intermediary is Software Foundations. And so IBM was using PhoneGap, it probably still is, using PhoneGap pretty heavily in attributed many digits of millions of revenue. So it was in their interest to keep that open and free and have one stream. They didn't want to fork it and maintain it themselves, and they wanted to have us collaborate in neutral governance. And so Apache Software Foundation is very famously a very IBM friendly place. We started chatting with them. They were all on board. Adobe was on board. Adobe wanted to have outside contributors also. They didn't want to be the primary bag holder, as it were for the open source project. So this was pretty aligned. We did have some initial friction because, ironically, at the time we were being threatened to be sued by the Gap. And the original PhoneGap logo was actually, at the time in the mid 2000s, it was cool to have a Helvetica logo and to bold one word. And if you bold Gap in Helvetica, you literally have the Gap's logo. And so Apache wanted our code, but they did not want that lawsuit. So they said, you keep the name and the brand, and we'll take the source code and we'll take it under a donation of a different name. And that's how it ended up becoming Apache Cordova. And then PhoneGap became the software distribution of Apache Cordova. So it was just legal square dancing, as it were. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're at your time, I'm just curious, when you were at Adobe, can you tell me what's behind being the principal spacelord?
Oh, yeah. So this was a mistake, actually, and for any of the founders that are now watching this, they're going to ask you, if you do end up in a diligence situation for an acquisition, what titles you want. And we didn't really have titles at Nitobi. There was about 25 of us, I think, when we got acquired. And, there just wasn't any need for that. I was maybe like a CTO, but it would be pretentious to be at a really small consultancy that largely makes its revenue on open source support contracts to have a bunch of fancy titles. So we didn't.
Right.
And when the big company was doing diligence, like, what do you want your titles to be? And we all said ridiculous things. I said spacelord. And in hindsight, that's a huge mistake. Don't do that. So your main form of currency at a big company is your title. So
it's sticking though. It's making waves.
Yeah, so we did that. It was pretty funny, but it quickly became apparent that if we didn't have titles that people respected, we wouldn't get it. And we ended up having to fight for it post hoc, and it was uncomfortable and it shouldn't have been necessary. So,
Right.
word to the wise, in the future, you get the highest level title that you can if you happen to be so lucky to be in a diligent situation.
Cool. So
Yeah.
from Adobe, what was the transition like to begin? Like, can you tell us a bit about, you know, the begin story, I guess? What made you move from Adobe to begin, or to just, you know, create this company? Maybe tell us a bit about, you know, the origins and also why begin, the name? How did you come up with it?
Yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff there. So in 2011, we were acquired. 2012, I moved to San Francisco and started working out of our Townsend office here in SF. And ostensibly, I was like the guy in charge of mobile open source, whatever that means. And they sort of gave me a carte blanche to research that. And I had never had a budget or researchers. So access to like analysts and actual formal researchers. So I started to use that budget and monitor the size of the app store relative to how many PhoneGap apps were being built and where they were being distributed and all that good stuff. And around, and the numbers were huge and they were good and they were growing right up until around 2014. I started tracking that the app store had been flatlining, and it flatlined for about 3 quarters in a row. It wasn't dying. There's about 100,000 new apps a quarter or something like that, but another 100,000 or more fall off the other end, and so it's not growing. And you know, if your job is to be the open source mobile guy and your thing isn't growing anymore, you start looking around, going, "Oh, okay, what should I be doing now?" And but the first thing I had was a question of, well, where are they going? You know, like, what are these people doing? And the more I dug into the data, it looked like to me that a lot of people were moving to messaging platforms. They weren't installing apps anymore, and they were spending the majority of their mobile phone time in Messenger or Slack or WhatsApp. And those numbers were growing, and actually still kind of are today. And I got really interested in where mobile looked like to me that it was going to messaging, and I was interested in where messaging was going. So I left in 2014 and started pursuing the idea of doing something on the Slack platform. And I didn't really have a concrete plan of what that would be. I was just excited. My co-founder and I were just excited about the concept of work moving to real time. And more in particular, we were excited about what the Slack team had been building for a platform. So, you know, we take it for granted now. We see Slack apps with tons of integrations in them, but back in 2014, 2015, that was a brand new platform, and there were very, very few users. There were no libraries for it yet, and it was looking like there was going to be a really big growth opportunity there. So Ryan and I left with barely an idea, no company name. He was working at AOL at the time, and I was working at Adobe, and we put together a hasty seed round, and we started building a bot for Slack. And we called it, I think the first version was called Check, and we were going to try and do something in productivity because it's a work chat. And so we figured productivity and work chat would be a good place to be. We didn't think that would be the business or the final thing. We were just trying to get a toehold in the niche of the platform opportunity. And I went to an AWS summit that summer in 2015, and I saw API Gateway get released. And this was the first way that you could do HTTP events to Lambda functions. And I'd just come off, you have to remember, PhoneGap build was a very large service on Creative Cloud, and we were maintaining it. It had many servers, many database servers. It was extremely hard to deploy to and keep up and running. I think our lead time to production could have been measured in days. You know, it was a very gargantuan system because it had a lot of servers, and you know, you don't want that to go down. Like, you don't want to be the guy that brings down Creative Cloud. So we had to take that quite seriously, and we did. And when I saw API Gateway get released, it was just like someone had snapped right behind me, and it clicked. And I was like, oh, that's what's going to happen to the cloud. There's not going to be any more server farm orchestrated deploys. We're going to be using probably Amazon and probably this service right here. And we we had built at that time most of our system in a traditional kind of manner, and it was good, but it wasn't great. It had a lot of the performance problems that you have with a multi-tenant system where you've got lots of servers. Our deploy time, I think, for the original thing that became Begin was something like 20 minutes. And with API Gateway on Lambda, we got that down to a few seconds. And so as a startup, time is money and iterations are lifeblood. So if I take an hour to get to production and then someone else takes a minute to get to production, they can get 60 more iterations in than I can. And I don't want to compete against the guy who's got more iterations. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is a huge edge. Like, this is where it's going to go. And we started building our stuff on this. And the Slack App Store just never really got going. I think it's gotten going for integrations and maybe small to medium business type things, but definitely not a venture scale opportunity at that time anyhow. Not to say that it can't be, but by 2017, it was becoming really clear that we did not have something that we could turn into a venture scale business. And we got a whole lot of people that wanted to buy our tech. So they didn't want anything to do with our bot. They wanted everything to do with how we were deploying, because they saw us getting these iterations out really fast, and getting on Amazon is not an easy thing to do. So we pivoted it into doing CI/CD around 2018, and here we are today, trucking along as a pre-seed company. And then the name Begin, we did not pick, so it sort of picked us. We knew we wanted a 5-letter .com domain name, and we knew that we wanted it to be an actionable verb. And there's a thing called domain brokers, and it's a very common way to get these high quality domains. They're also very expensive. You have to engage with this broker who's going to take a cut off the top, and they're usually 550 checks. So they're not small checks to buy a decent domain, but not huge either. And the credibility of having, a name that is .com recognizable as a verb is a big deal. So we went through, my co-founder Ryan went through the dictionary, and we got all the 5-letter verbs. And then we just started going one by one with this domain broker, trying to find one in our budget. And we got to the letter B. Begin. And,
so you didn't get too far. You still had a lot of a lot of letters left in the alphabet.
That's right. Yeah, but we got there, and that's such a great domain, and we pounced on it for sure.
I think it's very appropriate, right? It's almost like new beginnings and a new approach, right? So it's and is that how, I guess, being involved with AWS led to you being the AWS Serverless Hero and being involved in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was a big honor. I didn't expect that. I was stoked when they did it. It's a very exclusive group of people. I've been a customer for a very long time, but I kind of stay in my own corner with Amazon. There's people out there that are just wild, and they have way more knowledge than I do. I've stayed quite squarely in the serverless offering space. There's over 300 services. I am reticent to say I'm an expert, and I'm pretty deep in just like a few dozen services. But yeah, they're a wonderful partner to work with, and such a great platform. They get a sharp tooth sort of reputation, and they've earned that. But they had a 7-year head start on all the other clouds, and despite the marketing, I can tell you as a practitioner, they still have like a multi-year head start on the other clouds. The capabilities are just unreal. The unit economics of where it's going are it's staggering what I can pull off now as a software developer. I have so much more power than I used to. I can spin up thousands of instances of compute and scale them back down, and it won't cost me even a dime. We've just never had this kind of superpowers before. The other clouds are getting there, but they just don't have the breadth of features or the stability and speed that Amazon's got. Right. Jeff Bezos is definitely playing the margins game. They're just squeezing that down and further.
Right. So would Microsoft Azure, would that ever be in the Would there ever be
Yeah.
integration with Begin in the future, or
Oh, for
another
sure.
cloud
I think
providers?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see us like a young HashiCorp. We have a really similar kind of approach and methodology and thinking. Where we're coming from is really pure cloud. So whereas the sort of initial cloud was a lot about like taking the metaphor of servers and then virtualizing it. So we have VMs and containers, and that's fine, and that's worked really well. This new paradigm shift to functions as a service and the serverless primitives, where we have these high-level managed services, is pretty big. And Azure just isn't quite there yet. They're making the right noises, but the characteristics of their offering just aren't there today. Now, here's the thing, though. Satya is an amazing leader, and already his execution has been pretty flawless. And he's playing a much longer game than people are giving him credit. The acquisitions of GitHub, the investment in Visual Studio Code and TypeScript and their Edge browser really sets them up to be the forefront of the future suites of developer tools and all that new developer mindshare. They've already locked up the enterprise. So the enterprise, when they're getting online, they're just going straight to Azure. And I think it's only a matter of time before they come around and flank Amazon on the top of funnel, younger developer crowd with their offerings. So I'm watching them carefully. We're giving them tons of feedback. They're still missing key primitives for us to do what we do on Amazon today. And the problem with us is we're making some pretty big promises, and I want to be able to keep them. And if I tell people that you can deploy in seconds and have this instantly scalable system with Begin, right now that's true. If I add Azure, it isn't. So I can't do that just quite yet.
Right.
And I want it to be true. Amazon needs some competition to keep them honest.
Competition is good, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and Azure's going to get there. They just got a big. Amazon has a big head start right now.
Right.
But they will get there.
So I'm just wondering from the audience perspective, and for developers, maybe that are used to the traditional sense of development and CI/CD and DevOps and things like that, and if they want to find out more about serverless technology, is there any resources that you can recommend in terms of how to provide education? And
I think it's something that you would definitely want to take a step at a time. It's a big, tricky world. There's a lot of vendors. Not everyone's advice is going to apply. So the first big step is to decide which cloud vendor that you want to go all in with. I think the idea of doing multi-cloud is real, absolutely possible. But if you're going to eat an elephant, you got to do that one bite at a time. So you're probably going to want to start somewhere, and you want to start with the cloud that's going to be the most comfortable to your development experience and platform today. If you're a .NET shop, if your data is an SQL server, if you're used to writing C#, you're going to want to go to Azure. Like you're going to do that. That would make sense.
It's a natural transition, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, build up to that, and do a small service first. Do an Azure Functions app that runs on a cron schedule, and just do something really small, and then start building up that expertise. Because if you try and do some big rewrite serverless, you're going to fail, and then you're going to blame serverless, and everyone's going to be sad. But if you can take these little bites off the elephant, you're gonna have a lot of fun, and you're gonna be able to build on that success and grow.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah, that's how I'd approach it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. As a Canadian,
yes,
moving towards the Valley, can you share with us your experience and I know with the Canadian culture and US and just moving there and relocating. What were some of the barriers, the challenges, and what would you recommend somebody that, that wants to follow those, that path and is really interested in working in that area?
Yeah, well, you can't get more exciting than the Bay Area. Although right now I wouldn't recommend it, but given the current situation with COVID-19, so it was really difficult for my wife and I at first. it's a whole new city. It's a whole new culture, like you say. It's a lot different than Vancouver, that's for sure. And we lived in Vancouver forever. My wife and I met in Gastown in 2003 at a startup.
Wow.
Yeah, and I lived in Gastown up until we left in 2011. And yeah, it was hard at first. It was definitely a lot easier when Obama was in charge. And the day of the Trump election, we struggled with whether or not we wanted to stay, and then we decided that if we're going to stay in a place in America, San Francisco is the most probably liberal place that you can be, and if anything, it's more liberal than Vancouver in a lot of senses. So it was okay to be here through all that. We learned to love the city for the things that make it great. So at first it was hard because we wanted it to be like Vancouver, but it's not. It's totally different. And what makes Vancouver great is Vancouver's got its moments where it's not so great either, when it's super rainy in the middle of November. But we all know that like that first beautiful spring day and the dead heat of August, or the awesome first like frost and fall when it's like foggy in the morning, those times in Vancouver are so special and awesome. And San Francisco is similar in that it's got awesome moments and not so awesome moments. So we learned to find a way to love it.
Right.
And yeah, from a perspective of opportunities for your career and your company, it's pretty impossible to beat. There is just so much access here. Founders help founders out implicitly. If you're fundraising, it's very easy to find other founders to compare notes with, to strategize with. They'll help each other with introductions. If you want access to pretty much anyone, it can be done with a reasonable amount of effort, but a low touch effort. People are out here to help each other. Access to the company. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. What do you think that secret sauce is in terms of, that area, in terms of having startup founders share and help each other be more successful? How can we actually replicate that over here? We're doing that, in terms of, like, for example, startup grind, right? That's what we're trying to do. But do you have recommendations in terms of how we can actually extend and champion that even further to recreate that type of community?
Well, I think that one of the big superpowers of the Bay Area is also one of its Achilles heels, in that there is a lot of government support here for the machine that is the startup ecosystem. And Canada is still playing a bit of catch up on that front, in my view. We subsidize pipelines before we subsidize, big co's moving into into places. Lucky Vancouver is in proximity to Seattle, so we've now got anchor tenants like Microsoft and Amazon and Slack and others, Shopify.
Right.
So we've got some great. That's kind of what it takes. It takes the investment ecosystem. It takes big anchor companies that are fueling exits, and hopefully, when those exits happen, the employees and the founders that benefit then reinvest that back in the angel community in the local area. And I think we are seeing a bunch of that happen. Since Slack's IPO, we've seen Stuart has been angel investing like crazy in Vancouver founders, and was before too with the Slack fund. They were in on our startup as well. So I think Vancouver and Seattle both compare themselves to the Bay Area, and they really shouldn't. They're just different places and have intrinsically their own strengths. In particular, Vancouver is, as everyone probably there knows, it's a high quality of living and a very safe and clean place comparatively to any U.S. city. So you get a better quality of life, and that does lead to happier teams, and I'm willing to bet that leads to better product as well. So I'm hopeful that we'll end up putting up the big dollars that we see in oil and gas for investment in tech. And now, especially now that we've got some motivation to invest in that sector. But, who knows? I think Canada can always do better and is always looking to better itself. But we should be really proud too. There's some pretty great startups that have come out of Canada and that are building up.
Yeah. Cool. So Brian, I'm really I'm really curious. I'm sure the audience is curious. How fast is fast? So if you can maybe we'll move into your demonstration, your demo.
Yeah, I would love to do that. That is fun. Let me see if I can get up.
Let me switch that to webinar mode. Okay, then I'll stop my screen share so you can do your screen share.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Karen.
All right. Can you all see that? Don't mind all my weird test stuff. Is this showing up?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. So this is begin.com, and our idea is continuous integration and continuous deployment of Lambda functions to AWS. So I'm just going to create an application here in my GitHub, and we'll call it Hi Startup Grind. Now, our goal is to hit 0 seconds. We're not quite there, but we're working on it. So it just created a repo in GitHub. And if I come back here, we can see that it's kicking off the CI/CD. And so this is going to create a repo in GitHub. It's going to check that code out. It's going to run its unit tests, and then it's going to deploy it to a staging environment. And so here's our hello world in 8 seconds. Mm-hmm. But just so you can see that, you know, I'm not faking it here and no tricks up my sleeve. We'll modify this. Startup. Okay. Commit that. And I come back here, we should see a build's already kicked off. I could have made it faster if I got rid of my npm install step. That'd be kind of cheating. Then we can go back here, say hi startup grind. So that's 5-second lead time to production for a Lambda function. And let's take that and we'll deploy that to production. So we create a isolated staging and then a production environment. So that's all set up for you when you get going to a URL. And in our world, commits to master are staging. And then if you tag it, that'll do a production deploy. And so we tagged it 1.0. And this is really nice because then you have an independent history of your, and now we're on here on our production app where 1.0. And so if you go into your GitHub repo and you go to releases, you'll have like a tagged history of the exact source code that resulted in the exact deployment. Yeah, so that's it. Now this is just sort of the demo, obviously, but we have the capability of building out HTTP routes, SNS topics. We have DynamoDB database, static assets, teams, and the ability to create custom domains for that stuff. The other sort of nice feature of all this, we deploy just to our AWS right now, but you can deploy it to your AWS anytime you want. You can leave us. It's all open source. There's no lock-in.
Like with DynamoDB, is it? Can you actually work with alternate databases?
You can, but the performance just isn't there yet today for Lambda. So there's a few ways to do this. Dynamo is just so fast, so they've designed it for this use case, and it's still the best at it. RDS product, there are ways where you can create a bridge to traditional databases that have a socket. But the way that Lambdas work is they go away. So they execute and they're gone, and that's it. And you only pay for the execution that you use. And if you open a socket to a database, that's actually a really expensive operation. So they have to create a proxy that keeps the sockets open, and then you round robin through that proxy. But now you added a bunch of latency in order to talk to your traditional database. Whereas DynamoDB is an HTTP interface, and so you can do something like about a megabyte every 10 milliseconds of streaming. So you can get quite a bit of data back and in and out of that thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really cool. What about the your involvement with I guess ARC codes? Can you speak a bit about that and how that's related to this?
Yeah, and actually I could demo this as well really quick. So let's see if I got my screen share. Oh, thanks, Kenneth. And then you share. So I'll show you arc.codes. This is the open source core that we based everything on. And I'm just going to go into my desktop. I'm going to make a directory and call it, I don't know, grind. Make sure I delete that later. I'm going to touch a .arc file. And so this is the manifest format that we created for doing infrastructure as code. The idea is that you have a file in the root of your project. It's this .arc file. And we're going to create an HTTP server, and we're going to mount a Lambda function at get/. So I'm going to run arc init, and that's going to generate a Lambda function for get/. If I look here, it's my get index, and there's my Lambda function. And there's no extra code here. There's a big HTML document, but I'm going to delete that. So this is just a plain JavaScript Lambda function. Plain function, nothing special. Whoops, let's change this to that. And now I'm going to start a local sandbox. So it begins based on this tech. Oh, this is probably going to launch my Firefox. Oh, well, anyways, plain function, nothing special. So you can see it running locally. Yeah, not my Firefox. So that's cool. That worked. Running locally, nice. A lot of other serverless frameworks don't have a local dev experience, but we do. I'm going to deploy that straight to Amazon. So Architect doesn't have all the nice CI/CD stuff. It's really low level. And under the hood, we generate a CloudFormation document, and then we publish that CloudFormation document to AWS, and AWS turns that into the infrastructure that we're looking for. And usually this takes about a minute, sometimes a minute and a half. It's not super fast. And what we realized is that we could take a lot of that waiting time out by doing a lot of the work in parallel and in advance. And so that's where the begin edge comes in. If you're working with CloudFormation, it's a little bit slower and definitely a little bit more dangerous and brittle. But if you put begin and architect in front of it, it becomes super fast, and you don't really have to think about it. So let's take a few seconds.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
But we should have a URL pop out here any moment now, and we can see our app deployed to the cloud. The begin really just takes that friction out, and but because it's based on open source, you can still get in there, and there's no magic. You can see how we did it, and if we made any mistakes, you can fix them. If there's any bugs, they become shallow. If there's any security issues, we usually find out about them right away. So it's a win-win having an open core, and that was a learning out of the PhoneGap project for sure. Oof, that was painful.
Right.
So here we go.
There it is.
And yeah, plain function, nothing special, but you can see this is deployed fresh to Amazon right here. So like one other little thing to note, if we look at my root of my directory, here's that .arc file, and it's 5 lines of code. It generated 271 lines of CloudFormation. And so this is the native format for AWS. And there's nothing wrong with it. You can write this stuff directly, but 271 lines is going to take you a little longer than 5. So that's the sort of big difference between those two things, and that's the benefit you get out of building on top of Begin versus just the open core.
Cool. Thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah.
So we're going to go into some quick fire questions, and I'm going to ask you a series of questions. It's very fast, but in preparation for that, if the audience can start, using Slido, just go and ask your questions, and we'll queue up the questions, and we'll fire away at Brian. So if you guys can go in and put in some questions using Slido, that'd be great. For those that haven't seen the Slido hashtag, it's hashtag SG Richmond BC. Okay, Brian, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Marvel or DC?
Oh, I mean, okay, for movies, Marvel. For comics, DC.
Okay. Texting or talking?
Talking. Talking.
Beer or wine?
Oh, that's hard.
Or both.
Probably both. I mean, I used to hate wine, but moving to California changed that for sure.
Yeah. Well, you got amazing wine there. So, Lyft or Uber?
Lyft.
Why Lyft? Why not Uber?
Less sexual harassment lawsuits, I guess.
What?
They got really unpopular locally here, actually.
Oh, I see.
For a little while, yeah.
So, what's the first thing that you would grab in the morning? First thing in the morning?
Probably my cat off my lap, and then quickly followed by my phone. Sadly.
How about your last Netflix binge? Movies or movie or series?
Series, Great British Bake Off. So good.
Yeah. What about the movie?
Everyone should watch that.
What about
movie? Oh, we watched Lethal Weapon. It's terrible.
Which one?
The first one. Yeah, the first one. Yeah, we were doing some retro.
But that wasn't that the best out of the series. The first one.
I'm. If that was, I don't know. I'm gonna watch 2 soon. I'm planning on.
iPhone or Android?
I go back and forth, and I've been doing this ever since the PhoneGap days. I'm currently in my Android cycle, but I'm pretty interested in that SE. So,
yeah. Do you think you'd ever go back to iPhone?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think so. Yeah, and I have an iPad. I sort of prided myself on being proficient in both platforms, like as a programmer. So I try and keep it semi-fresh.
Right. Okay, final one. If Siri and Alexa were to get into an argument, who would win?
I'm gonna say Alexa because I think she's got a bigger corpus of data to draw from.
We should run that experiment. We should pit them against each other and see what happens.
Spontaneous AI. Oh no.
Exactly. Okay, thanks, Brian. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into the audience Q&A. So we're just going to go through the questions, and again, if people can just go into Slido and type away, ask Brian, any questions that you're interested in, whether it's how is it in San Francisco working there, or whether it's a question related to Begin, or previously with Nitobi, go for it. So first question, Brian. Hey Brian, can you tell us about how you and your co-founder Ryan came together?
Oh yeah, Ryan worked at Engadget, which was acquired by AOL. I'm not sure when, but ironically, his office was above mine on Townsend Street. So we initially, when we were acquired, we were put in the 601 Townsend Adobe sort of headquarters office. They had a skunkworks office up the street that we managed to score a space in that was just below TechCrunch and a whole bunch of other startups. And it just so happened that Ryan's was in the same building, and we got to know each other by basically being office mates. And yeah, we went for beers a few times, and it became very clear that we could work together and that we'd be a good team, and we have been.
Oh, cool. Next question. How's the fundraising scene nowadays in the Silicon Valley amidst this COVID-19?
Well, if you ask the venture capitalists, they will tell you that they're open for business. But I suspect that they are mostly open to waste your time at this current juncture. I think if you got runway, stretch it out and use it. And don't waste your time trying to talk to VCs, because I don't think they're cutting checks right now as much as they are pretending they are, and they're just going to waste your time. I'm hopeful that that story is going to be changing in the fall, but I wouldn't be banking on it either. I would be taking every option I can to find whatever funds that you can at the moment. I certainly wouldn't be planning to run a process this late in the spring already anyways. If you hadn't already started the process for spring, there's no way that you're going to get it done with a handful of Zoom meetings, and it could just end up stretching your time and your budget to do it. So use this time to build the network and build your contacts, but I wouldn't try and run the process right now personally. I think it would just waste a lot of your potential time, which could be spent on growth or customers, or maybe finding a bridge or angels or a government loan or whatever you can do to stretch your time. But
Right.
It definitely, you could hear a pin drop in this city. It's really slowed down and quiet. There are lots of Zoom meetings happening, but I'm pretty deeply skeptical that there's going to be big deals made in this period anyways.
So do you think it's going to be, even after the COVID-19, do you think it's going to slowly ramp up back to where it was before, or do you think it'll pick up pretty quickly?
Well, there's a lot of capital out there, and interest rates are low, so they have to put that capital to work, but they just don't have their shit together yet. They don't know what process they're running. It's sort of the lizard brain, and so they're probably having lots of meetings, but meetings aren't checks, and it'd be very easy to burn a lot of time doing free diligence right now. I think let them figure themselves out, and the process is going to become sort of more clear as time goes on. They're going to have to deploy the capital either way, but this is definitely time to dig in, draw on the network, and build the relationships. But I don't know that I would be trying to close a deal in the next couple months.
Right. Okay.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, though. So take everything I say with a big grain of salt. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. With the economic crisis looming, what are your advice for startups and businesses that are affected in various ways?
Well, I think this is a really good time to be reflective and to take care of your people and to take stock of the situation. This is not the moment to make big moves or to do anything super drastic. This is definitely a crisis, and I think your team is looking for you to be a leader and to be like a rock for the rest of your team. So you got to find ways to bring normal into play. And I think for your employees, this is the time for you as an employer to go the extra mile for them as well as them for you. So if you've got parents, they're having a really hard time right now, and they don't need extra work stress. And if you want to retain them or have them be a refer and grow and give you their best, you might have to cut them some extra slack right now, which can be hard. I think if you've got limited runway that you want to really stretch that out, which might mean belt tightening, like cutting salaries or I don't know whatever you can do. I do think that this is not something that's over in 2 weeks. Like we keep hearing from various news sources and politicians, we should be planning out 18 months and thinking a little longer term, which is going to do the best that you can do. I do think that you can use this crisis to make lemonade. if you've got the right type of product and or service in this world. But you also want to really be careful what message you're trying to send. You don't want to seem like you're being exploitive or profiteering in this time, because that'll be a real bad look down the road. So it's a tricky thing to navigate, and I think it's okay to do nothing, a little bit of nothing, and just watch what's going on and tighten the belt.
Well, a lot of companies are giving back during this time, right? So they're not necessarily trying to monetize, but they're just trying to, you know, help other businesses, you know, move forward. Because even within, you know, dealing with your product, you're also looking at how do you manage your organization now that everybody's working from home, right? Because from a leadership perspective, you know, a lot of times you're used to just managing teams that are in the same building, right? And whereas now, if you're not used to it, if you're not doing remote development and you're working with offshore teams or anything, from a leadership perspective, that could be a challenge, right? So for leaders, learning how to lead people that are remote, right? And that's something that has to be learned.
Yeah, and practiced, and you're going to get it wrong, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to fix those mistakes, and you're going to get better. And it's going to take time. And I think, you know, everyone wants everything to get right back, and that's natural to feel that way. But I think this is where real leadership starts to shine. And having a steady hand here is going to be really important, I think. You don't want to run too fast if you don't know what direction you're going in. So it's okay to go like a little slower right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Next question. What advice do you have for early stage startup founders that are considering moving to San Francisco?
Well, I would probably wait a few more months for things to calm down. This would be a really terrible time to try and find an apartment and move here. And it's a place that you might want to spend a bit of time getting to know. And so I don't regret this at all. We rented the first years that we were here just to learn about the city and understand what neighborhoods that we wanted to be in. And we ended up getting ourselves priced out of multiple attempts to try and buy a home here, which was probably for the better given the current situation. So I would advise to date the city before you marry it. I would say come down here and spend some quality time getting to know San Francisco, and reach out to me if you want a friendly face that's Canadian. I'm happy to take you out for a beer as soon as the bars are open again, and acquaint you with what I little I know about this place.
That's awesome. Thank you, Brian. I think you're going to regret that because there's going to be a lot of people knocking at your door now.
Well, if they're buying,
I'll be the first one to reach out to you.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. How big is the team now at Begin, and what advice do you have in terms of building and defining culture from the get-go, and as you ramp up?
So we are 5 full-time. Almost all of us are swapping between being developers and developer relations and support and product engineering and marketing. So it's very startup-y. Everyone's wearing every hat. And I think for me, the big thing about the early stage for the culture is I like seeing ownership, and I like seeing people prioritize 3 individuals. So the first person that I want you to prioritize on my team is you. You need a healthy team that is well rested, because sloppy programmers are not going to help us win in this market. The next person that I need our team to care about is our customer, and then last of all, we need to be caring about each other. And so, if we can care about those things, then I think we can do a good job, and everything else sort of falls out of that. And I think these things never go the way you think they are. We started this in 2015, and we're still going here in 2020. Serverless is just starting to take off, and we're starting to just get the excitement around it, where we have venture-looking numbers. So I think persistence is a thing. I think a lot of people will say that, but like it really does take a long time, and success is a weird teacher. So, you know, everyone remembers PhoneGap for its acquisition and exit, but I remember the 4 years that it took for us to get there. And it takes it takes a while.
Hard work,
and yeah, and you gotta stick with it and stick with your team, and know that you're all in that together.
Right. Next question: is it hard to attract talent as an early stage startup in San Francisco?
It hasn't been for us, but I think this is a very case-specific question. There's a lot of people out there that want to work with Ryan and I and my colleagues at Begin, and very easy for us to get people excited about coming and joining our mission. That's a per startup problem. You know, every startup's going to have its easy days, and some startups are going to have their hard days. We've been really lucky because we're so dev focused. It's very easy to find developers that want to get on that kind of mission. I think in general, that's kind of the case. People that are here and around the world are looking to be challenged and have autonomy. They want to make a dent, you know, and if your startup if you can sell that vision, then you're going to be able to find people for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Next question. This is a fun one.
Yes. So
benevolent dictator. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get rid of that title.
I tell you, titles stick. It's going to be
they do
forever, right? So.
Well, I'm the original author, so I guess I get a little bit of extra cachet on that architect project. But we donated this to the OpenJS Foundation. It's called now, subsidiary of the Linux Foundation. And they do not have a benevolent dictator model per se, but they end up these hierarchies end up emerging. I'm not hey, I'm in charge, everything has to go through me kind of guy. I'm a hey, we need help, please send me PRs kind of guy. So and we merge just about everything that we get, and if it's not mergeable, then we help fix it. So I guess that's the benevolent part. The goal here is to not have your open source project depend on one person. So it's kind of a bad code smell in a way to have, you know, the bus factor of one. And my true desire is for architect to live outside of me and beyond me. So it's a title, but it's more of an honorific than a real thing, I think.
That's cool. Okay, next question. Can you tell us a bit about your code joke site, WTF.js?
Yeah, in 2007-ish, I think I registered that one, and I started collecting all of the weird things that happen in JavaScript that make you go, what the fuck, when you're working with it. And it took on a life of its own. It was one of those early meme sites. I actually got to meet Brendan Eich a few years later. As he's shaking my hand, he's like, wait a second, are you the WTF.js guy? I was like mortified. Brendan Eich is the creator of JavaScript. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I love that site. It's hilarious. So I guess it worked out. Yeah, I need to touch that up. It looks pretty bad these days. It needs some love. But yeah, that's what happened there.
Okay. Next question. Can you tell us a bit about the corporate culture and what it's like at Begin?
Yeah, we have our actual operating name of our company is Small Wins, and so we didn't have the domain begin.com until later. And it's been my philosophy for a long time that the way to build something big and great is to take small chunks off it, and to build momentum that you need to have and celebrate tiny victories. And so the name of our company is Small Wins. Our goal is to try and hit production once a day with some fresh code. And you know, no big deal if you don't, but that's the goal. And usually we manage to do that for everybody more than once a day. And so that means that we're always building up momentum, and we're building up our code base, and we're not pushing ourselves too hard. I said this earlier, but I really do believe it. The worst programmers are the ones that are stretched too thin. So we try and keep our team happy, healthy, and well rested, because when we do need to call on our team to swarm a problem, they're going to be at their best, and we're going to see their best. So our culture is really kind of antithetical to what you hear out there. You hear stories about startups and how they're like, long hours and evenings and weekends, and I've been a part of those startups, and that can work. And if you're on a rocket ship, sometimes you can't avoid having a few extra hours here and there. But by and large, we try and keep a reasonable cadence. We treat it like more of a marathon than a sprint. And I feel like that's been why we've been able to compound so much growth with such a small team in such a short amount of time. So it's
and I guess
a little different.
Small team, you have a flat structure, right? And everybody's voice is heard, and yeah,
a lot different than a bigger company. Yeah, for sure. We definitely have some more senior people and some more junior folks, but everybody's definitely contributing and growing. This is the fun thing about our job is, there's no I did it, now I know everything. That's not going to happen. So there's still something to learn from everybody else. And when you empower people and give them, responsibility to do something, they take it. And I've been super impressed watching our team grow and learn in the past year and a bit, and I'm pretty excited to grow it even bigger.
Awesome. Next question. In your experience, what are the key differences when fundraising and maintaining relationship with investors between SF versus Vancouver?
I've never done any fundraising in Vancouver, so I can't really say. I have met with investors in Vancouver and chatted with them, but we've never did our process there. We were able to pack in 20 meetings a day and run a process that's pretty tight in San Francisco. I know of 2 venture firms in BC, and I suppose that I could get meetings with them, but then I'd have to fly back down here and do the rest. So I guess the big difference would be the number of people that you can meet with, the amount of capital that they're deploying in BC and what sectors they're deploying it in don't necessarily overlap. And there's just not as much action to be had, even compared to Seattle. If I was living in Vancouver, I'd probably be looking to run a process in Seattle now, honestly, and San Francisco. The way that things are going with COVID-19, I don't know that these borders even matter now. In the next 6 months, I'm pretty sure every VC is going to have some Zoom process. We have to take X number of Zoom meetings a day to turn it into X number of deals. So that's probably going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the new normal, right, moving forward. So, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to shake anyone's hand, and you don't want to shake theirs. So it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's where we start to, without the handshake. So.
Yeah.
How big is the Canadian founders community in SF?
It's really big, actually. There's quite a few. And I keep meeting people I didn't know were Canadian and find out they are after. Or we'll be talking. They'll be like, wait a second, are you Canadian? They'll be like, are you Canadian? So there's, apparently, I've heard there's as many as 20% of the Bay Area is Canadian. Wow. And I wouldn't doubt it. I know there's a lot of us. Yeah. Now, those aren't all founders. Many of them are working in big co's, but yeah, there's been bigger paychecks to be had here. So a lot of engineering talent has come down.
Okay, next question. How do American Angels VCs feel about Canadian startups in general and fundraising?
I think that there's a bit of a reticence from the more traditional VCs around the exit opportunities, because if you're a startup and you aren't going to work out and you want to find a soft landing or a place to exit that IP or team to, you get the pick of the litter here in San Francisco. Whichever big co you want that team to go to, you can probably find a deal to be made. In Vancouver, this is just much harder. There's less companies to run a process and do a deal. So you might be able to find VCs that have relationships with the new Amazon and Microsoft offices that can make something like that happen, but probably less likely right now. So there's some reticence from the institutionals, the VCs, but the angels are all over it. The angels want to write as many checks as they can. So the angels don't give a shit where you live and where you're doing your business anymore. So if you're doing that pre-seed seed round and you're doing convertible notes, and as long as your paperwork is in Delaware and there's a clear path that demonstrates that you are moving to a venture opportunity, you can find angel checks from all over the world, no problem.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to do a final call for questions for the audience Q&A. If anybody has any more questions, please do a submission. Well, I have a question for you, Brian.
Sure.
If you're to do this all over again, right, from the time in which you pivoted and the formation of Begin, moving to San Fran, what would be the one thing that you would actually do differently?
When I first got here, I saw a beautiful, gigantic Victorian house on Cap Street, and it was $700K for 3 floors, and it was a mess, and it was just like it needed a lot of work. But I when I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is such a cheap place. Why? And then when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's why it's not finished. It's like basically down to the studs. That same house, I think, sold last year for $3 million. So I would have bought it, and I would have fixed it up. If
only we could turn back time, right?
Yeah, I would have just done more real estate stuff. I don't think I would do substantially a whole lot else different. I probably would have gotten into wine sooner had I known how good it is from Napa. I probably, I don't know. I'm probably, if I guess I had the foresight, I might have moved to a slightly different neighborhood. I live in the Mission District, which I love, and I've had a lot of fun in, but I'm in my 40s now, and I was in my early 30s when I moved there. So the Mission's where all the bars and restaurants and all the fun are, and I'm not fun anymore, so I don't want to be here necessarily.
How was the adjustment, when you moved over in terms of just cost of living, right? And,
yeah,
everything so much more expensive that we're used to what it is here in Vancouver, but when you move over, it just it's like a punch in the face, right? It's just so different.
Yeah, it was, and still is. It was shocking to us. Although now in hindsight, my apartment here is rent controlled, so I'm in a pretty great place comparatively to a lot of other folks. I imagine that there's a correction going on, and that story is going to change. I do watch the stuff here, and I think they're still selling houses at $1,000 a square foot. So the market hasn't corrected yet, but the way things have gone, I would expect it to. So if you're looking for the opportunity, I'd say now would be an okay time to move down here and rent for a while and just watch what's going on. But if you're in Vancouver and you've got a scrappy startup, this is the time to not move to San Francisco. This is the time to take advantage of the remoteness and use the technology for what it's supposed to be good for, and figure out a way to carve out that company from Canada. I think would be the right thing to do right now.
Cool. Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Glenn.
Audience Q&A, and we really appreciate you taking the time, and sharing your story and your the battles, and as you went from Nitobi, Adobe, all the way to Begin. It's really cool what you're doing. So, but thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Kenneth, back to you.
Okay, I'm back on. Thank you again. Thank you again, Brian. Very good and inspiring, and good insights for fellow Canadian in SF. Obviously, I'll hit you again later on when I go to SF next time to a global conference, Startup Grind Global Conference, if they open next year.
Definitely, or when I'll be back in Vancouver this summer. So.
Oh, that too. Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, we wish out and get together hopefully we can get together by then.
Beers on me, Brian. Look us up.
Deal.
That's
Sounds
good.
like good to me. I love that.
Yeah.
That's good. So thank you again. So I'll move on and talk a little bit about what's coming up for Startup Grind Richmond. Let's see. So these are our upcoming events. So we have a couple of workshops coming up. April 29th, we have How to Find Your Ideal Co-Founder, a workshop by Chin. And then on May 14th, we have another one, Startup Mistakes to Avoid and How to Validate Your Ideas. It's also by Chin. And in June 3rd, we have another founder Fireside Chat interview. Christine built her subscription boxes business 5 years ago and building it to a 20 million revenue, US dollar revenue business with bosses. It's going to be an inspiring and good learning opportunity for a lot of startup founders. So I'm looking forward to that. So with that, we have those QR codes. If you're interested in, you can point your phone and then you can sign up from there. We'll also send out those links to register for these events in our post-event email as well. So someone asked if we are going to do recording earlier. We are going to send out the recording link to all the attendees later on in case they miss part of it. So let's see. Okay, so thank you for joining us today, and we are looking forward to seeing you in our future events. If you want to visit us, connect with us, or follow us, go to our website, startupgrind.com, Richmond, BC, or if you're active in social media, feel free to follow us in Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram.